In this module, we'll be talking about HTTP protocol. So, let's see. Earlier, I think we have talked about networking. We have seen networking requires what? Host. Networking requires socket, server socket. There's a connection which is made between a client and a server. The server listens on a particular port, and the client, whenever he wants to make a connection, he connects on a specific port number. Fine. That's a raw level. Fine. Raw in the sense, yes, it's just giving us a stream-based connection, but on this connection, some kind of data needs to be exchanged. There has to be some kind of rules according to which the data can be exchanged between the client and the server. Okay. One of the kind of stateless protocol for communication between client and server over a TCP/IP. Fine, that was TCP/IP, server socket and server socket. That was using TCP/IP. One of the stateless protocols which works on top of TCP/IP is the HTTP protocol. It is the most commonly used protocol on the web when we use a browser. Most of the time we are using the HTTP protocol. So let's look into, in this module we'll be looking into the details about how this HTTP protocol works and the structure of the HTTP protocol. Fine. Yes, most of these protocols, or most of our protocols are also based on where we have a client-server paradigm, are based on a request and a response. A request goes from a client, is initiated by a client, goes to a server, and server gives back a response. Okay, so coming to the HTTP protocol. Yes, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Yes, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Oh, we normally feel hypertext. Oh, that means hypertext markup language. Oh, yes, it was most commonly used for transfer of or exchange of hypertext markup language, the hypertext hypertext content. But HTTP is not restricted to only transfer of hypertext markup language, HTML code. HTTP is used for any kind of content transfer. It's capable of transporting any kind of content between client and server, server to client, client to server, content exchange. It's a protocol for exchange of content. Let's see the details about how this protocol is capable of exchanging any kind of content. Fine. This protocol, HTTP, is, yes, it's mainly around exchanging content between client and server. What we'll be looking at here is the request and the response formats. Fine. Once a TCP/IP connection is, one thing to remember here is, yes, by default, it's the most commonly used protocol. That's fine, but the standard port number which is used by this protocol is port number 80. So HTTP works on port 80. Fine. You have details of HTTP in RFC 2616. Fine. But let's try to look at it in a more simplistic manner. Let's try to understand the HTTP protocol in a very simplistic manner. So it's a request response protocol in which a client would be the one who will be initiating the connection. Once having made a connection, on the connection he sends a request. The client sends a request. Normally our client in case of HTTP protocol, the most commonly used client is the browser. Fine. And we have a server who would be receiving a request, and after receiving a request can do its own processing, whatever is required at the client, at the server end. Fine. Create a appropriate HTTP response and send it back to the client. And the browser client, the most commonly used client, which is browser, what it does on receiving a response, its normal job is to render it. Fine. It normally shows it. That's that's what the browser does. But yes, it could be some other application which may like to use this information in its own manner and need not necessarily be rendering or displaying the content. So let's see the format, what exactly is sent across by the client to the server in the form of a request, and what is the format in which the server sends a response back, sends a response to a client. So to understand the request and the response formats, let's start with the client side. So yes, what exactly is going in the request of a client from starting from client. So yes, when let's say, so in a browser, let's take that session. In a browser, when you type a URL, you're just simply typing a URL, let's say http:// you're given some host / and you're given some path / some file name. Okay, so that's the kind of URL you are writing. Fine, and you may press enter and go to this. Yes, what does the browser do for us? What does the browser do? It would make a connection. Where does it make a connection? Looking at the URL, looks at the host. There's a host part, so it knows that's a host I have to connect to. HTTP default is port 80. Unless in the URL you mentioned a port number, it would make a connection on port 80. So make a connection to the server. Fine. Assuming there is a server working on that host at that port number, it would be successful in making a connection. Once a connection is done, on this connection, it is sending a request. Let's look at the format of this request. This request, you can break it into 3 parts. The first line is a request line. Then a request line is then followed by a number of lines which we have. They're plain text lines, which are pure ASCII lines, and these are what we call as headers. So it would then be followed. So first is a request line, followed by a number of header lines, and then we have a blank line at the end of all the headers. A blank line indicates there are no more headers, and then after the header there can possibly be a content, because yes, the HTTP protocol has a provision of even a client sending a content back to the client sending some content to a server. Fine. We do have such a thing happening when we are attaching a file. Yeah, it's a client sending a file to the server. Okay, there are various reasons. When we submit some form in HTML, okay, it could be that you are sending a content to the server. Okay, so let's see the exact details of the format. Yeah, so first line is a request line. What is there in the request line? In the request line, it starts with a method. The request line would normally start with a method. For example, the most commonly used method would be the get method. Fine. We have a get method followed by what is the resource which you want. Get followed by the resource name. So resource name would be, for example, when you said http:// in the URL, you specified a path and the file. So that path and file is the one which is the resource you are fetching for. You are fetching that resource on the specified host. Fine. So that's the second part. So first line, the request line contains a method followed by the resource, followed by which version, which HTTP version I am following, because yes, there are various headers which will follow, and in the versions of HTTP versions, a particular headers, each of those headers has certain meanings. Fine. So there may be new headers added in a new version of the HTTP protocol, and what would be the meaning assigned to it? That is something which should be known to the server. So we have it mentions, yes, this request is being sent according to so-and-so protocol. It's an indication also that yes, I will be able to understand this protocol. So your response must be in this protocol. So first request line, method, commonly used is get. You could have a post. Fine, there are other methods as well. Second, the resource, and third, protocol. So protocol version, for example, it says http:/1.0 or http:/1.1. Okay, so that's a first request line in the request. Then a number of headers. Okay, a number of headers. They have headers for various purposes. What's the purpose of these headers? The headers are here as additional information related to the capabilities of the client. For example, oh, the client will say, oh, I can accept images, I can accept, or I can't, oh, it's a text browser, it will say, no, I don't accept images. So what are the kind of things it can accept? Fine. Oh, many times there are things which are specific to browsers. Fine. We have seen, oh, the Mozilla supports certain things, and certain things would be different things would be supported by IE, or different browsers would be supporting. They behave differently sometimes for certain kind of tags. Okay, so maybe the server, if he gets to know who is the sender, or which browser it is. So we do have another header like agent. Fine. So user agent, yes, it will say user agent, that is a header which can be used for specifying which browser version it is. So fine. And like this, the various kinds of headers putting in additional information which is related to the browser, which the browser wants to send. Fine. Or there might be information which is related to, oh, I'm sending a content. So there is this content, we can call it as a payload. So in our HTTP protocol, there could be some payload, that's the content which is to be sent across. So information related to the payload. Oh, what is the length of the content which I am sending? What is the type of the content? Oh, whether it's a text content, it's an image, or what I am sending. Fine. Such information, additional information. Fine. Information related to what I support. What are the preferences of the user here? Oh, this user is preferring the content to be in a particular kind of a language. Oh, I would prefer the content to be in Gujarati. Oh, that could also be sent as part of the headers. So we got various headers to give information. The purpose of the headers is to have additional information being sent across to the server, make it available to the server. You have information very commonly used related to even a cookie, or there are cookies which are available on the client machine. The information about the cookies need to be sent to a server. Yes, what are these cookies? Okay, little understanding about the cookies here. Okay, cookies are nothing but they are pieces of information which the server has set on a client, saying, oh, whenever you connect to me next time, you please send this additional information to me. So cookie is such an information which the server wants the client to keep on sending again and again till a particular point of time. Yes, cookies have their own format where expiration time can be specified. So there's an interaction between there's a kind of a understanding between the client and the server, HTTP client and HTTP server, where server is able to set a cookie on the client, and then onwards, because it's a stateless thing, it's then onwards, whenever a client makes a connection to that particular server, it has to remember, oh, these are the cookies which the server had asked me to remember, and I'll send it to him. So basically cookies are some pieces of information which are normally some kind of a key value pairs. They are key value pairs which are being maintained by the client for a server. It's a server who is setting it. Fine. So client has to manage some kind of a database for the cookies, where it remembers, okay, these are the cookies which are from so and so server. These are the cookies which are from so and so URL. So it needs to manage such things. Whenever any connection is being made, it knows, oh, I'm making connection to that server. Any cookies for that, I'll need to include that in the header. So that's the way the cookies are being used here. Pieces of information set by server on a client, which the client would now onwards, subsequently, all its requests, it should include, oh, this is what you had asked me to remember. Fine. It's a stateless protocol. Remember this. It's a stateless. So stateless in the sense that, yes, a client makes a connection to a server, sends a response to him, sends a request to him, gets a response, and then they don't remember each other. It's like a new transaction each time. So one connection, one kind of a transaction taking place. It's not multiple things across one connection. So you don't remember that server. The client doesn't remember the server. So that way it is a stateless. Fine. So on this stateless, yes, this can bring in some kind of a state. Fine, for an application. If an application wants, it can use this kind of cookies to be set up and to maintain some kind of a connection between some kind of information which connects. Okay, so that's what the purpose of cookies were. So the format of HTTP request, a request line followed by a multiple headers for the purpose of specifying what kind of capabilities I'm having. Fine. Or I can even handle, for example, it might even say I can even handle compressed content. You can send me compressed content, I'll be able to understand that also, what kind of compression I can send. So headers for various reasons, and sending capabilities, sending cookies, fine, and sending, if I'm sending, if the client is sending some kind of a content to the server, the metadata related to the content, all that, preferences of the user here, oh, who is the user, even authentication information, who is the user, all such information gets included in the headers, and a blank line. And then, okay, if this is a request which contains some kind, which has a content, yes, if it's a GET request, it doesn't have a content part. If it's a POST request, it would have a content part. So in a POST request, yes, it would have a content, and that content is what follows the blank line. So the syntax of request is first request line, header line, end of headers indicated by a blank line, and then it could be content of any type. Okay, so that takes care of the request format for the request. Coming to the response, when the server receives a response, what the server would do, yes, it will be able to know all this information, get the capabilities of the client. It may be intelligent to use, it may or may not be able to use all the information. So whatever the level of intelligence it has, maybe it uses the information about, okay, I know this is the browser is so and so, and therefore the formatting of tags, what tags I use, what I send across should be different. Maybe that intelligence may or may not be there. It depends on the server side application. So server side, yes, does its own processing on receiving a request, but ultimately it would send back a response to this. Okay, on this connection, when the response is sent back, fine, the response would be sent. Okay, now coming to the format of the response. The response, first line, again here we have something similar to what we found with the request. The first line is a response line. It would then be followed by a number of header lines, a blank line to indicate the end of the headers, and then of course the content which is being sent. So client is requesting, most of the time client is requesting some content, fine, a resource that, see, whatever resource he is asking for is corresponding to some content which would corresponding to resulting some content being sent from the server. So coming to the format here, first line is the response line. In the response line, the first field would be the protocol version. Fine. So it says HTTP. Fine. So most common, if I've said HTTP/1.1, so most commonly HTTP protocol 1.1 is being followed. So it first may look like HTTP/1.1. Then it is followed by a 3-digit response code. So we have a response code. There are various categories of response codes, and then it is followed by a message which is corresponding to the response code, a text corresponding to our response code. For example, fine. So most common response code, when it is a normal response or the content, you have asked for a content, I am sending back a content, and therefore in such a case the most common response code would be 200, the digit 200. Okay, we actually have these categories of response codes. The various ranges are available for various purposes. We have the 3-digit response code range from 1, or I'll put it as rather 1XX, 1 and followed by any of the digits. So 100 to 199, any digit there is saying, oh, it's an informational response. Oh, sometimes we have informational response being sent. Okay, so fine. The informational response may not have a content part. Yeah, it would still be having content, but it's not the whole of the content. It's partial content or whatever. Fine. So that's an informational 100 to 199. That's an informational response code. We have the most commonly used, which is the 200 to 299, or 2XX rather, we can say. 2XX, that response code, again, most commonly it is the 200 which is used. it is nothing but it indicates successfully completed processing of your request, and I am here having a content which is being sent for your response, for your request. So your request was processed successfully as you wanted, and here is a response to it. Here is the content of that. So most commonly you'll find 200 followed by a string. The text corresponding to this can be okay. So 200, okay, fine. So 2xx, that's a category for successful completion of a request. Then the next category is 3xx, 301 and onwards, right? So 3xx, that category, 300 to 399, that category is mainly for redirections. Fine. Redirection means, yes, oh, you requested me a resource here, but this resource is not available here. I'm not sending back a response here. I'm not sending back a content, and the response is, this response is there, but it's not for giving you a content. It doesn't have a content. It's rather, it would include just some kind of a location. It would include a header to indicate where this content can be obtained from. So it would be, it's like a redirecting you to a different URL. So there is normally, if it's a 3xx, it would have one of the headers called location, which is giving the new place from where the resource needs to be fetched. This resource has actually moved to another place. There are various categories saying it's temporarily moved, permanently moved, and various so various categories of redirections. But yes, redirecting you to, so it's redirecting and asking the client to make a connection to a different server, not from me, but from this place. So giving that as part of the header. So headers are used for various purposes. So 3xx is that category of redirection. 4xx, this is a category where the client has sent a request, okay, but whatever he is requesting, there's something wrong about his request itself. Okay, what could be wrong? Oh, what you are asking for, such a resource is not available at all. Oh, most commonly you might have seen such a things. 404, 4xx, I said, okay. So 404, file not found. Fine. That's a text corresponding to 404, file not found. It might be 401, 402, fine. Though, some of the things are, oh, you are not authorized, or this is a privileged resource, and you have not been authorized to use this. So there are various kinds of reasons for which your request is being rejected. I'm not sending a content here. Fine. I'm not sending the required content here which you have requested for various reasons. Either it's not existing at all, you have requested something which doesn't exist, you are not authorized. These are some of the common reasons why so this is unsuccessful. The request has something which is wrong. There's wrong in the request. You are not authorized. It's a client side's mistake. Okay, client is requesting something he's not supposed to be having. The next category is the of response codes is the 5xx, 500 to 599. This category is for the server side error. Your request looks fine to me. Whatever request you have given is fine, but when I initiated the component for my processing on this side, there's some failure which has taken place in the server. There's something wrong on my side. The server is saying there's something wrong on my side. There is a server error which has taken place. This is probably because the application on the server side, some component there has failed. So it would give a 5xx response saying, okay, there's a failure here, and you won't get a content there. So these are the various categories of the response codes which you have in your response. So the first line in a HTTP response is our response line, containing first field is the protocol version, response code, and some text corresponding to the response code. This would then be followed by a set of header lines. Okay, headers again similar. There'll be headers to indicate what server it is. Fine. Which server, which OS it is. I'm sending. Okay, it is sending a content. When it is sending a content, the metadata related to the content. I am sending content, and this content is according to so and so language, or even which language this content is about. It is in English, it is in Gujarati, it is in Hindi, or whatever, it is in German. Okay, what kind of content it is? Even that is a metadata related to the content I'm sending. Fine. Oh, it's an image. So what is the content type? Fine. What is the length of the content which is being sent, or whether it has been compressed or it is not compressed. Fine. Or some kind of header to say, oh, you need to remember this. So if it is trying to send a cookie, cookie is not a content. So cookie, if it has to be set on the client by the server, he would have to use the headers. So headers are used for these kind of purposes. Headers would be used for indicating some of the information about the server itself. A server sends its version and name. Okay, fine. So we have all these headers, and then so some of those headers we said are related to the metadata, and then we have a blank line followed by the actual content. Right? So if you want to simply try out, okay, a very simple experiment could be, you can go for you know, some HTML content which comes directly, there's no redirection taking place. If you know such a URL, and you got a machine where you have a telnet installed, you could even try it with telnet. You can just say telnet, give the host name, fine, your domain, the server name, server's domain, and the port number as 80 probably. Use appropriate port number. Once you do telnet, it would be connected. Once it's connected, you could try out with just 2 lines there. First line, get and the resource / or whatever, followed by resource, and then get resource, and then HTTP /1.1. And most commonly they'll understand 1.1. Second line, put the header host colon and give the domain name again here. Fine. Host is a header which is compulsory in version 1.1. HTTP 1.1 requires host header. Fine. So put that header and a blank line. You don't want to put in any other headers. Just a blank line, and there you should be getting the HTML content there on your screen. Fine. So that's just to experiment. Oh, you can that yes, these are the headers which the browser was doing it for us actually. Fine. The browser includes lot of other headers as well, but this is the minimum thing with which you can just experiment and see that yes, how the HTTP protocol, the content comes back to you. Fine. So this is how the stateless HTTP protocol works.